Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you Holo Taco's new Mixed Emotions collection for their 5-year anniversary. So first of all, a big happy anniversary to Holo Taco. It is crazy to think it's already been 5 years because I remember when they first started and it doesn't feel like that long ago, but 5 years is a long time. It's been really cool to see what the brand has done, how they've grown over the years, and the new polishes and finishes that they've put out, specifically with their anniversary collections, because I feel like that's when they would kind of tease new finishes. You might remember last year they gave us their first kind of jelly polishes with the retro anniversary collection, and this year we're getting thermals from them. Thermal polishes are really cool because they're basically color changing depending on your body temperature or just the temperature around you. Like wearing these on a pool day or a beach day is so fun because normally you're running hot and then your nails are gonna look one way, but then once you dive into the pool or swim in the ocean for a little bit, the cold water is gonna make them look completely different, and it's just a fun, like, reactive thing. It certainly is a choice to be releasing thermals in the middle of summer though, but I will save some more of my thoughts for the end of the video. For now, let's just get into the swatches. Just kidding, I wanted to give a closer look at the limited edition collection box. Here is the front and the back with the usual names, but the design on this is just so cool because the little wavy pattern is also temperature sensitive. So the colors that you already see are in the quote-unquote cold state. Obviously the box is not cold, it's just room temperature, but once you kind of touch it, the colors get lighter and it is just so cool. So then once you open up the box, the inside says, "I don't know how to feel," and the back of that is also temperature sensitive. Again, super cool, super fun to play with. And then here's a closer look at the unicartons. These aren't temperature sensitive, but they do have a holographic kind of effect on them, so you're still getting all these rainbows, and the pattern is so fun with the different little faces on it. The collection box also includes this 3-pack of sticker sheets, and they all have the same kind of faces or patterns on them. The main part of the sticker is also temperature sensitive, so you can see that the heat is also transferring from the back of the sticker sheet into this lighter pink color, and the actual faces are holographic, so super fun. So the first polish we have is Funny Feeling, and this one is described as a turquoise color in the cold state as seen here that transitions to a chartreuse yellow in the warm state. This also has a hint of green shimmer and a scattered hollow. So as you can see, I'm definitely running really warm here, so the polish transitioned immediately as I'm applying, which was really cool to see. The formula on this was nice. It was maybe a little bit thick, but still very easy to work with. I ended up only doing 2 coats on this one, but looking back, I probably should have done a 3rd just because that base color is so light. And I wouldn't agree with calling this a chartreuse yellow. To me, I would call it more of a very, very pale lime green. So I actually really love this one. It was one of my favorites from the collection. Next up we have Rage Bait, and this one is described as a coral in the cold state that transitions to a yellow tangerine when warm, and this one is also described as having a scattered hollow and a purple micro shimmer. But unfortunately the purple micro shimmer was really hard to see. I would say it's the most subtle out of the other polishes that has a shimmer, but you can still see the hollow sparkle. So this one had a pretty similar formula to the last polish where it is a little bit thick, not the most self-leveling on the first coat. While the warmer color here isn't as light as the previous shade, I feel like it still is on the lighter side, so you might want to do a 3rd coat to fully cover up your nail line. And again, since I'm running so warm, I wanted to dunk my nail in some ice water, and you can see that the very cold color is actually more of a hot pink and not really just a coral. Like the color you saw in my bottle was definitely coral, which I would say is kind of the middle tone of these extreme states. And speaking of my bottle, it actually ended up changing color as I was swatching. I don't know why, it's the only polish that this happened to. Next up we have Guilty Pleasure, and this one is a purple color in the cold state as seen here that transitions to a flamingo pink in the warm state. This one also has a hint of magenta shimmer and a scattered hollow. This one had a fantastic formula. As you saw here on the first coat, I got really great coverage. It was very even, it self-leveled really nicely. I wouldn't call it a 1-coater exactly. I would still recommend doing 2 coats, but I think that's all you would need to make this one fully opaque. So yeah, this one one had a really nice transition. I also like that you could actually see the shimmer in this one. Even though it's not very overpowering, it's not as subtle as it was in the last shade. And surprisingly, this wasn't one of my top favorites, mainly because I wish the pink was a lot brighter. This one's a little bit more of a muted berry for me, but the purple is gorgeous. Then we have Deeply Superficial, which is a bright magenta pink in the cold state that transitions to a pale, semi-translucent pink in the warm state. This one is also packed with multicolored iridescent flakies that are mainly yellow and some pops of blue or purple, and it has a scattered hollow effect too. The formula on this one was really nice. As you can just see, it's very sheer. I would say it's almost like a jelly kind of formula maybe, where it's just so easy to work with, very self-leveling, very even coverage. It's just sheer, so I would highly recommend doing 3 coats for this one if you want to build up the opacity and cover more of your nail line. I feel like we've seen this super light, almost colorless pink to a darker hot pink transition before, and I'm a sucker for it every time. I especially love that this has those iridescent flakies because it just gives it this very ethereal, almost fairy-like look, especially in the warmer state. The deep magenta is still super gorgeous, but you can kind of still see some nail line with it. And rounding out the collection, we have Simply Chaotic, which is a dark purple in the cold state that transitions to a turquoise in the warm state. This one is also packed with iridescent flakies in blue, turquoise, and orange kind of colors, but I feel like with the turquoise base, they can make some of them look a little bit golden or yellow. Still super gorgeous though. This one had another fantastic formula that was very pigmented, very even coverage, almost like a jelly formula similar to the last polish, just not nearly as sheer because obviously this is several shades darker. So personally, I only stopped at 2 coats for this one. There is still a little hint of nail line, but it just wasn't enough to do a third for me. I really love the colors in this one. That turquoise is super gorgeous. The deep indigo that it transitions to is also stunning. I don't know why, but I feel like I'd love this for Halloween. So here I'm wearing the Mixed Emotions collection as a Skittle. I'm wearing 2 coats of each and showing them in different lighting. This is natural direct sunlight, so I'm definitely running very warm here. My nails barely have a little bit of that gradient effect. I couldn't get my hand fully cold, especially since I'm in the sun, but this is after sticking my hand in the freezer for a couple of minutes and even rubbing my nails against like an ice cube, so that's what those streaks are. So once you do have more of this gradient effect, I feel like it just looks so fun and colorful. Again, I just wish Guilty Pleasure was a little bit brighter. Here's the same Skittle in more bright indirect light, and I don't think I mentioned it in that last clip, but you can see a bit more nail line with Funny Feeling and Rage Bait, which are on my pinky and ring finger respectively. So again, you might want to do a 3rd coat for those, especially if you are going to be like outside or just running warm. But if you do run colder, I think all you need is 2 coats, because once they are the teal and kind of hot pink coral shades, you don't really see that much nail line anymore. So again, I have the colder effect here after sticking my hand in the freezer for a while, and at this point my pinky and middle finger are like completely in the cold state, but the other 3 polishes didn't fully transition, even though my whole hand was cold at this point. And lastly, I wanted to show how these thermals look on my right hand where I have shorter nails. There still is a little bit of free edge, but obviously not as long as my left hand. So even with doing 2 coats again on the shorter hand, you still are going to see some nail line with Rage Bait on my ring finger and Funny Feeling on my pinky. But Guilty Pleasure and Simply Chaotic on my thumb are definitely passable on 2 coats. And again, here I tried to show off the colder state after having my hand in the freezer. So my whole hand is cold, but for some reason only Funny Feeling on my pinky and Guilty Pleasure on my middle finger were the ones to more fully transition. I don't know why. I was just getting a much slower transition with Rage Bait, Deeply Superficial, and Simply Chaotic, where it seemed like they weren't transitioning just based off of my body temperature, but they only transitioned if I was touching them against ice. Moving on to comparisons, I wanted to start with Funny Feeling and show that next to Teal No Lies from the Shimmering Secrets collection. That one is more of a metallic kind of formula, so a totally different look, not to mention it's several shades darker. I also wanted to show this next to Be Kind Rewind from last year's anniversary collection. I thought these were going to be a bit more similar, but Be Kind Rewind is more of a true blue, while Funny Feeling is a lot more teal, so I think the closest color-wise is Never Tied Down. They're obviously not dupes by any means, color-wise, and of course finish-wise, since Never Tied Down has more of those flakies and all this extra shimmer. It was really hard to show the actual comparison of these side by side since I was just running warm, but they're not dupes. And here is the warm state of Funny Feeling next to High Def from last year's anniversary collection, and you can see that these are also not dupes. Then for Rage Bait, since my bottle was kind of in that middle transition color, I wanted to quickly show this next to Lowkey Blushing so you can just have an idea of color reference. Rage Bait is definitely a bit brighter and more coral leaning. I thought it was actually going to be closer to Cirque's Amour Propre from their Good Vibrations collection a few months ago. That one has a little bit more of a similar coral kind of color, as well as this purple sort of shimmer, but the shimmer definitely stands out in the Cirque shade more than it does in Holo Taco. But aside from that, the colors are not anywhere near dupes. The warm color of Cirque is this light pink, and even when they're both fully cold, they are just completely different shades. Next, for Guilty Pleasure, I wanted to show this next to Inside Job, again mainly for a color reference. These are obviously very different formulas. Guilty Pleasure I think I would call more of a blue leaning purple, and it's just a little bit more muted, but not as muted as something like Nightshade, for example, from last year's fall bundle, which you can see that one is also a little bit more of a red leaning purple, at least compared to Guilty Pleasure. And then for the warm state, I thought I could compare Bury Me in Hollow, since that's like a deeper, warmer pink, but that one just is a lot more berry, red leaning, so definitely not dupes. Next, for Deeply Superficial, I of course had to show this next to Life in Plastic from last year's anniversary collection. That one is a warmer, more hot pink with a micro glitter instead of a flaky, so totally different colors. I thought maybe Deeply Superficial would be a little bit closer to Feelin Fiendish from the Sophia collab, but that one's just a little bit more purple and more muted. So I thought the best comparison for at least the warmer color would be Holo Taco's Blush Money from the Shimmering Secrets collab, just because it's a very, very pale pink jelly base with this micro glitter formula. So the components inside the jelly are different, but even the base colors are a little different too. They might look similar on the first coat because they're just very sheer, but once you do a second coat, you can definitely tell them apart. I did also want to compare this to Cirque's Fairy Floss, which is this bubblegum pink jelly base that also has iridescent flakies, but these are mainly blue flakies. It's missing those kind of golden yellow ones in Deeply Superficial, but the base color is a little bit too warm as well, so definitely not dupes. I had to squeeze in a super last minute comparison. Here is Deeply Superficial next to Blossom's Firebreath from Mooncat's Powerpuff Girls collection. I thought they were going to have a more similar flaky color mix, but Mooncat doesn't have as much yellow in it, and I think the base is a little bit deeper and warmer too. I thought the closest dupe to this thermal was going to be Cirque's La Vie en Rose, which is a previous Do Good polish that transitioned from a dark magenta to a light baby pink. This one just has a scattered hollow effect, but as you can see, these definitely still have a very different kind of color to them. Cirque's is like a whitened baby pink sort of crelly shade, and even in the coldest state, it doesn't transition to as deep of a magenta, but I think it's mainly because my bottle's old. And lastly, for Simply Chaotic, I of course had to show this next to Mooncat's The Sea Between Us from the Songs of Sirens collection. I would say they have a pretty similar flaky color mix where they're like green and yellow and maybe a little blue, but the main difference is their base color, where The Sea Between Us is more of a true blue, and it's also a little bit more sheer. This is 2 coats of each, so I wouldn't say that these two are dupes at all. Since Simply Chaotic is a bit more teal, I thought maybe it would be more similar to Mooncat's Maelstrom from that same collection. And the flakies look like they are an exact match here, but the base color is just way too dark, so also not dupes. And lastly, for the cold state of Simply Chaotic, which is now on the right side, here it is next to Midnight Owl from last year's After Party collection. That one is kind of similar, but a lot deeper, and it's filled with glitters instead of flakies, so they're like cousins. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Holo Taco's Mixed Emotions collection for their 5-year anniversary. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release, because I know a lot of people were really on the fence over these thermals, not really because of the color combinations, but mainly because they are thermals being released in the middle of summer. I know a lot of other indie brands on the market do thermal polishes, and some of them even pull their thermals during the summer months just because they don't want to risk risk sending out a polish and then it dying in transit. Obviously, I'm sure if anybody has any issues with their thermals arriving dead, that Holo Taco would replace them. But yeah, I would just say that if you are planning to order these anytime soon, to just make sure you are staying on top of the tracking, so that way once it's delivered, you're able to bring it inside as soon as possible. Unfortunately, when Holo Taco did send me the email saying that this collection is on the way, they didn't include the tracking number, and I didn't think it was a problem since usually when they email me, I end up receiving the collection on the launch day, sometimes the very next day. So throughout the weekend, I kept checking my mail to see if it had arrived, but it didn't. So I sent them an email on Monday morning asking if they could provide a tracking number for me, and unfortunately they didn't get back to me until well after my package was delivered. So it ended up sitting outside in the heat on Monday, which I don't remember exactly how hot it was, but it was hot for close to 4 hours. Granted, most of that time it was in the shade, so it wasn't as bad as being in like the direct sunlight, but I was still worried about it. But I did leave my package just on the side to acclimate for 24 hours, you know, reach room temperature. But once I opened my package, I just immediately noticed that 3 of the polishes, Rage Bait, Deeply Superficial, and Simply Chaotic, were kind of in that middle state, while the other 2 polishes were in the cold state like they're supposed to be. So I was a little nervous even before swatching them that they were like dead or partially dead, but obviously, as you saw, they still were transitioning. I do think though those 3 polishes are just much slower than they should be. Like normally when you're wearing thermals, especially if you have longer nails, you kind of have like a gradient effect, which I don't really have right now because it's hot. When I'm recording these intros, I have to turn off the AC because otherwise it's just too loud. But there normally is like a little gradient effect, and I do have like a tiny bit, like you can see the slight purple and teal on the tips here, but the other 3 polishes don't have that. But they do obviously transition if they're being touched in like cold water or if I'm like rubbing ice on them. So again, they do transition. They aren't dead by any means, but I do feel like those 3 just ended up being a little bit weaker or just slower to transition than they should. So again, if you are gonna be ordering them, I would just recommend really being on top of your tracking number. Don't order them if you're gonna be away on vacation or something, or even like away for the weekend, because the longer that they're like left outside in more extreme heat, the more likely they're going to be affected by that. And thermals, as you may know, already have a short shelf life where they just will kind of stop transitioning eventually. As you saw with my one comparison with Deeply Superficial, I still had my one thermal from Cirque called La Vie en Rose, which was from a couple of years ago at this point, and it does still transition, but it's just not as bold as it used to be. I've also had Cirque thermals completely die on me before. The only other thermal that I have is from Cadillacquer, and that one had a teal color that transitioned to black, and that one is from maybe 2020. It does still transition, but again, it's not like that same vibrancy that it had, but that's the longest lasting one that I have in my collection. And I store my polishes all in the same way. They're all in Helmers. Granted, they are in different drawers of the Helmers, but I really don't think that makes that much of a difference. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's just a difference in pigment quality maybe, where some thermals will just die faster than others. So unfortunately, with brands like Holo Taco and even Mooncat earlier this year releasing their very first thermals, we won't really know how well they stand the test of time until it's literally a year later. So like Christine said in her stream, if you are going to be ordering these, please actually wear them. Don't just like hoard them. I know they're cute because, you know, it's like the 5th anniversary. They're obviously limited edition, so once you use them, you know, they're gone. But it would be such a shame to just let them go to waste on purpose by ordering them and not wearing them. So yeah, overall, I definitely think these are fun thermals. Like, I like the color transitions. I was really surprised with how much I loved Funny Feeling. I knew that I was gonna love Rage Bait because I feel like it's just such a summer sunset Mai Tai kind of color, so I love that. But Funny Feeling being my top favorite was the biggest surprise for me. You guys know that I'm super picky when it comes to like chartreuse colors, so that's why I wouldn't consider this one chartreuse chartreuse, but even if it is, I would say it's the prettiest chartreuse I've ever seen. But the others are definitely really fun too, like with Simply Chaotic. I don't know why, but I feel like I just want to wear that one during Halloween. And thermals are super fun to wear in like the winter too, because obviously your body temperature is changing a lot quicker versus in the summer where you really have to be like going in a pool or the ocean to see more of a change. But yeah, overall, these were really fun, had nice formulas, and they transitioned well. So that's really what you want for a thermal collection. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this collection. I would love to know yours down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.